Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our bonus Wednesday episode, because we did not record on Monday and we're not going to be able to record tomorrow. So we are just doing a middle of the week episode. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to call it Missed It Monday. Kim finds a lot of pleasure in that name. It's hilarious. This is actually our second take recording because the first time Kim was laughing so hard, she was in tears and we had to botch that recording. Not that you guys wouldn't enjoy laughter, but it was about 7 minutes of laughter, and we didn't think you guys would want to sit through that. Oh. So before we really get into it, I'm going to quickly run through a few market updates. So if you've been paying attention to the market at all while we've been gone, it's been a little bit rough. We have Bitcoin down 4% in 24 hours, 4.5% over 7 days. It's currently at 18,900. We have Ethereum. It's down 6.6% in 24 hours. And just basically up 1%, pretty flat over 7 days at 1550. Our top mover in the top 100 is Helium. It is up 31% in 24 hours, but it's down 14% over 7 days. So it must have gone down quite a bit and just had a quick bump up today. It's currently trading at $4.77. Helium's goal is to start a wireless revolution powered by the Helium blockchain. The People's Network represents a paradigm shift for decentralized wireless infrastructure. And essentially, you can connect with them. You can get a 5G wireless hotspot. And it more or less functions on the Helium network. So as people use your hotspot, you can get rewards in Helium for that. So kind of a cool thing.
Very cool. Not the first time we've talked about them, I think.
Yeah, it seems like we've talked about them a time or two. I know they've off and on had quite a bit of press. So
Nice. Okay, so today I'm going to try to hold it together while we talk about pleasure. You ever have those laughs where you just start and you can't stop? Like,
yes.
So you may just have fits of giggles through this whole thing, but it is a bit fitting. Before we started today's podcast planning, we were really seeking the Father about what to talk about. And this is what he led us to, was the concept of Eden, and which actually means pleasure. And then we were trying to come up with clever names, because this is what we do. This is like the best part of the podcast, is coming up with a clever title. And we had some really funny ones. And then we started recording, and we have these notes that we share. And Josh typed one in that just took me off guard. And every time I saw it in my peripheral vision, I couldn't stop laughing about it. It was just very funny. And I guess I'll just leave that to the imagination to see if you can figure out how he would have made it super funny with it still being the same title as it is now. Use your own imagination.
That's right.
Okay. So really, this is what I felt like we needed to talk about with the concept of pleasure and Eden. Is it's kind of funny because we always have like Mystic Mondays, and so many times lately it's like, let's demystify this. Except we're really kind of mystifying it while demystifying it. But one of the things especially about this concept is I've noticed that the Western church tends to discount pleasure as a sin. And I don't actually, I know that is not how it's supposed to be. Um, I think if we go back to creation and the Garden of Eden, and again, the word Eden actually means pleasure. So it's a garden of pleasure, and that's everything was good, right? So in the beginning, everything was good and it was full of pleasure. And though there was the fall and original sin and all of that, which we will talk about at some point, whether today or another time, because we also have something else along these lines we want to talk about. So that happened, but then when Yeshua came, he came to fulfill the law and restore us back to be able to access the tree of life and the Father and all of these things, right? But for some reason, at least the church now, I can't speak for the church in the last centuries or whatever that I haven't experienced, but for some reason, that concept of pleasure has still taken on this stigma of being bad or sinful. But when he came to restore things, it was to restore back to the origin, right? And the origin was pleasure. And I want to rip it apart. Let's look under that Band-Aid and see what the heck is going on. And if we could just take that stigma off for a minute and actually look at it, I don't know, without that lens of sin on it.
Yeah. I think it's a subtle shift in the way things changed. Like here's a good example, and I can't remember where I heard this, or I would give them credit for it. But I heard this story from someone else. So if you read the Bible, while Adam and Eve are still in the Garden of Eden, and it's talking about food, it talks about how food was pleasurable. It was good to look at. It was delicious, and it was beneficial to eat. And then after the fall, when it describes food, it reverses the order, and it says that food is beneficial and it's nice to look at. And it just kind of subtly shifted like the focus from being about pleasure and enjoying the food to, oh, I need the food, but the food's still nice to have. Like it's still nice to look at, still tastes good, but I need it now. Whereas before, the focus was more on enjoying it, the pleasure of it, rather than the necessity of it. And I think that that's in a small way one of the things that Yeshua came to switch back to the appropriate order was having the having the ability to return things to their original state, to the original pleasure of it, so that you start to see life as pleasurable for you and enjoyable for you and something you look forward to rather than just something you have to go through. And it's just that small shift, but I think it's important. And you're right, many times we associate fun and pleasure and lightheartedness with sin, and I don't know why, but that I've seen that pattern in my life where I associate those things. And I really think that one of the things that God's trying to fix is bringing the pleasure back into life because he created it.
This is what makes me think of, you're talking about food. And I don't know if I'm sure you've heard people say this, oh, it's so good, it's sinful, right? It's sinfully delicious, right? But I think what that does is it takes the focus off of enjoying the pleasure with the Father or with the Lord because he allows it into kind of sourcing it from the tree of knowledge of good and evil again, right? So it is so good, it's sin, instead of it is so good, it is utter pleasure. And I am like, I'm grateful to the creator for it. I'm grateful to the Father for providing for his son, like all of these things. And it, I think we talk about this a lot. It can be the same experience, but sourced from a different perspective, and it completely can change it. And so I don't think that our society as a whole is devoid in pleasure. I think our society as a whole is devoid in sourcing the pleasure from the Lord and allowing yourself to enjoy it with him, and not just in the flesh and from the other tree, like, oh, this is good or this is bad.
Right.
But really drawing life from it. And it is like this. I feel like when you enjoy pleasure with the Lord, it is this really wonderful, euphoric state of relationship and intimacy with him, where it's this instantaneous, constant flow of back and forth. I love this. I'm grateful. You are the source. You are the best. Like all of this, but he is, I love you. I want you to enjoy it. Like it's this constant back and forth, this exchange of, it's like an action of love almost, right? Experiencing that pleasure with him, as opposed to saying, this is for me, this is for myself, and it is good or it is bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, I think it's a mindset shift, and it's I think it's significant for where we're going, because in life you really have the choice to look at things one way or the other. And if you can start to find the pleasure and start to source the pleasure from Yahweh, you will find pleasure in so many different things. And you will find Yahweh in so many different things that you didn't expect to see him in.
This is true. I mean, look at what happened just when we started the podcast today.
Mm.
So he said, this is what I heard from him, is that we need to talk about pleasure. I mean, Eden and pleasure, right? And then all of a sudden, some word makes me laugh for, it was a good 10 minutes worth of like silent he, like shoulders shaking, faces bright red, tears flowing, gasping for air, that kind of laughter, which is not something that is, I'm not like constantly a laugher. I don't
Right.
know if you've listened to the podcast that long. I don't know. I'm not horribly emotive. But I feel like this is probably why this happened, because he said, here, talk about this. And then I'm looking from that perspective, right? He's saying,
Yeah.
do this. I'm going, okay. And so I look from this perspective, and then it's pleasurable. Like it's fun, like it's funny, and it is lighthearted, and it's not heavy. And I think there's something to this. And I don't know that it always is going to be as easy as just going, okay, I'm going to look for the pleasure through the Lord with it. And sometimes it will be.
Right.
But I think sometimes it's also a process of getting back to that place, because we're so programmed. We've been so sin conscious programmed, and whether you're in the church or just in the world, right? Good and bad, right and wrong, all those things, right? You're constantly weighing, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Is this good or is it bad? But there's a process too of kind of coming out of that and getting back to the place where you're sourcing from the tree of life, like where you can actually go back to the place that pleasure originated, Eden, where the tree of life it still is. That honestly, Yeshua came to open the way back to, right? To this face-to-face relationship with the Father. But it can be a process, and it can be hard sometimes. It can be a hard process to get back to, like, life-giving pleasure.
True. Yeah, especially when it's been painted as such a sinful thing.
Right.
Yeah. Mm.
It makes me wonder, I'd like for you to talk about the fire thing because I have a pondering about it, but I want you to present the concept first.
Sure. Okay. So we were just talking a little bit before, the when Adam and Eve were removed from the Garden of Eden, it says that there were angels placed there with flaming swords to guard the entrance to the tree of life. And I have a suspicion that that sword strips off identities that we have carried that aren't sourced from Yahweh, and that we are actually able to return to the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life, but we have to go through the fire. We have to go through this purification process in order to return there.
There's more. Or maybe, okay, I'll present a little bit.
Okay.
So I wonder, based on that concept, by the way, I'm not saying it's truth or it's not truth, that you need to go and seek the Lord about yourself. Like, I'm not here to like change your mind about something. I'm here to point you toward the Father, but here's a concept to ponder, right? So if that is indeed what's happening, it makes me wonder, when approached with pleasure, if we look at it, and even those of us who are walking out our faith and stuff, if the reason that this is so stigmatized still, even in what would be more mature Christians and people of faith, is because they look at it and they see the fire and then they think, oh, that's hell, I'm going the wrong direction. When in
Mm,
reality, it is a refining fire to strip away what's left of that tree of knowledge so that you can be pure enough to go to the tree of life.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, do we look at the fire and automatically think we go right back to sourcing from tree of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's bad. If fire's bad, I'm going the wrong direction. I must
Yeah.
go back.
Well, even the scripture talks about the fact that the Lord is an all consuming fire, um, burning up that which isn't his. Like I think to me that's sort of where some of my thought process comes from is, if hell's an all consuming fire and Yahweh is an all consuming fire, like it's just a refining process that I think we have to go through. And personally, I think you sort of get the choice to go through it now or later. We'll probably unpack that concept more so in a future episode. But there's, to really be in Eden or a citizen of heaven fully requires you to let go of everything that you picked up and you carried and you made part of yourself that didn't come from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is like part of the journey of being a Christian is shedding those identities and letting go of those things that you carried as yourself that weren't sourced from the right place. And I think that if you do that, you start to go back to the tree of life, you start to go back to Eden, and you start to find pleasure in things.
And it doesn't have to be sinful pleasure.
Right.
Like, yeah, that the root of what pleasure is meant to be. And do we really, I think we have to really question this. And maybe everyone in their walk needs to do this in their own way, on their own terms, probably. We need to start questioning, what is it that I actually believe about this that is sin?
Mm, yeah.
Does the Father actually not want me to enjoy things? Right?
Yeah.
Um, it is painful to walk through this to get refined, but is it worth it for what's on the other side?
Yeah.
Do I believe he's forsaking me and having me go through the fire?
Right. I mean,
Right.
that I think about things like, okay, so we have like what we call a vice tax. So it's like a tax on alcohol, cigarettes, things like that. And we're actually proclaiming over them that they have a grip over us. And but what if you just walked in freedom? Would those things still be a vice? Would it still be sinful to participate with those things? I would argue probably not. I don't think it's the substance or the activity that necessarily is the sin, but it's the heart that you do it with. And if you are under bondage to those things, then yeah, I think taking pleasure in some of those things could be sinful because that's where you're at with them. But if you are walking in freedom with those things, I don't think that it any longer, I don't think it's black and white.
Mm,
I don't think it just is one day it's sin and one day it's the next day it's still sin. I think it's possible that if you step into freedom, that those same activities won't carry the same weight.
that's true. And isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that walking into freedom is not walking into independence, but it is actually walking into an even closer relationship with
Yeah,
Creator?
right.
You know what I mean? Like freedom has always, not always, maybe it's just in my mind, but it's always had this representation of like being unshackled, unbound to anyone else,
Right.
except that in this case, the freedom
It's really
is
not.
right. It is
Mhm.
actually freedom and oneness. It is like,
Yeah.
it's stepping into like being whole.
Yeah. I would argue that the law the law of Yahweh actually brings freedom. Um, and those sound like they're contradictory
Right.
because especially in my mindset as well, like you, like freedom is always pitched as this idea as everything is open, everything's on the table. But sometimes I think that it's the limits within those things that actually bring the freedom within those things. And I think I think you have to source that through relationship. And we've probably talked about this before, but there's definitely days where I'm talking to Father, and one day, you know, having a beer is totally fine. And then the next day I'm talking to Father and having a beer is not. And it comes out of relationship. It doesn't come a um out of a black and white book that says this is always one thing or the other. So, I mean, really it's just we're pushing you back into relationship, but as part of that relationship, you're going through a refining fire. And as you're going through the refining fire that's stripping off these old belief systems and these old identities, you're actually finding more and more freedom and more pleasure.
I love that.
Mm.
I think it's so true. And I also want to say, I don't know that once you go through the refining fire that you'll never do it again.
Yeah, it's
You know, there
definitely,
may
yeah.
be something else that he is bringing back to life, that he is stripping away the old ways and bringing you into the new ways that you'll go through it again. And it may
Mhm.
be the same concept in a different way too. Like
Yeah,
I've had this happen. So I'm saying this only to encourage you that if you think, well, I just keep going through the refining fire, I must just not be getting it. Or maybe he just is really accelerating you and really wants freedom for you. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like it doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be bad. Just remember that when you're going through the fire, it really is to bring you to life.
yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there for today. We're going to touch some more on this for a little while. We have a couple episodes planned that we'd like to kind of dive into aspects of this a little bit deeper. So stay tuned.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.